first pelvic floor activation that I'm going to show you is going to be in a standing position. Now this pelvic floor activation is going to be isolating out the anterior pelvic floor and the posterior pelvic floor. Now we know that that's not how the pelvic floor actually contracts, but I like to do this as an awareness exercise. So if your client or the athlete doesn't understand the difference between the anterior and the posterior pelvic floor, and you ask them, are you engaging your posterior pelvic floor? If they don't know what that feels like, it's going to be hard for them to then upregulate that activation. And remember, it's the posterior pelvic floor that connects to your feet. So I like to have this awareness or differentiation or coordination in the pelvic floor for a lot of my patients and clients. So for the pelvic floor activation in a standing position, we are going to bring our feet shoulder width apart, soft knees, and then we're going to stack the rib cage and the pelvis. So take the rib cage cylinder and stack it with the pelvic cylinder. Now remember that if I'm in a open position, so if my rib cage start to flare or my pelvis tilts forward, I just made it difficult to optimize the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. So we want to be stacked. So feet shoulder width, knees soft, stacked position. Your arms could be by the side if you would like, or they could actually go just inside your ASIS. So then when you engage the pelvic floor, you can feel tension underneath your fingers. So we are going to start with the anterior pelvic floor. Your anterior pelvic floor, remember, blends into your TVA. So when you engage that anterior pelvic floor, I want you to pay attention to see if you feel facilitation, activation, proprioception into the TVA. The cue to engage your anterior pelvic floor is going to be stopping your pee. So it is a classic Kegel. Remember though that as you engage your pelvic floor, there is always a lift. This is an anti-gravity muscle. Here we go, assume your position, and then let's engage the anterior pelvic floor. So engage, and then release. Engage, and release. Now keep doing that. Every time that you lift and engage, do you feel anything under your fingers that are just inside your ASIS? Every time you do it, do you feel something radiate to where your TVA sits? Every time you do it, do you feel a lift? Okay, now the activation strength, just like our feet, is going to be 20% release, 20% release. Let's do one more, engage and then release. Perfect. Next layer, we're gonna go to the back side and we're going to focus on the posterior. Hands can stay where they are, stay in your same position, relax the front if you can, and then we're going to engage just the posterior. Remember, the posterior blends into the deep sacral fibers of your glute max. So you want to feel something radiate into your deep glutes. Here we go. The cue for engaging your posterior pelvic floor is going to be stopping your poo, okay, or lifting. Technically, you're lifting your levator ani. Here we go. Engage the posterior, release. Engage, release. And if you have to shut your eyes, you could absolutely do that. It helps me when I shut my eyes. And release. Lift, release. Lift, release. One more and release. Perfect. Same 20% engagement. Now we want to see the layer of coordination we can create. So I'm going to have you stay in that same position. You're going to lift the front, lift the back, release both. So front, back, release. Lift, lift, release. Shut your eyes if you need. Lift, lift, release. Lift, lift, release. Let's do both at the same time. Front, back, release. Both, release. Both, release. Keep doing that. Now what happens if you actually push your toes down every time you lift? Lift, release. Lift, release. Lift, release. And now what happens if you add your breath? So every time you lift and you push your toes down, you're going to exhale, release, shh, release, shh, release, shh, release. perfect. So I actually coordinated very easily this standing pelvic floor activation, anterior posterior, with short foot and with the diaphragm. It is a great way, it's an easy way, and it helps your clients to understand and identify the front from the back and how there is a lift, how it connects to the feet, and how it connects to the breath. In the next video, we're going to go into how you can activate the pelvic floor on your back in a lying position.